being a business owner is uncomfortable because majority of people get into business not because they're good at running a business.
Yeah. Right.
But the reality is you have to make these types of decisions in order for you to excel and exceed. And so the biggest thing we want you to take away from this conversation is though your income may not be predictable, your systems need to be. Hello. Let's talk about income today. So most entrepreneurs struggle with this very thing, which is inconsistent income. And so today we figured we would talk a little bit more about what do you do when that happens and how to mitigate some of the roller coaster that some of us go on when it comes to bringing in money into the business. So Andrea, what do you find? Well, have you found that most entrepreneurs struggle with this? Because doing someone's taxes, you pretty much can see the ins and outs and the intimacy of their business. What do you think? Do you think most entrepreneurs, would it be fair to say they struggle with inconsistent income?
Yeah, definitely. Most people have seasonalities to their business. So they have high months, they have low months, and really understanding that for yourself is going to be a game changer. If you run your P&L by month, you can see which months did really well, which months were slow. So looking at the actual numbers will help you see like what's actually going on throughout the whole year.
For sure. And for those of you who don't know what a P&L is, that is your profit and loss. Sometimes people refer to it as an income statement, but it's basically the statement that shows the activity the business is doing throughout the year or the month, depending on how you pull it. And so looking at it by month is super helpful. One thing I do when I'm in my CFO role or I'm doing cash flow with and for somebody, I am comparing those numbers because I think more times than not, people struggle with not having monthly recurring revenue. And Andrea, how would you define monthly recurring revenue? What does that look like?
Yeah, monthly recurring revenue is like a subscription or it's something that you'll receive every single month, no matter what. So it's good to try to build that up as a business owner because it can get you through the slower times and help carry you into that next busy season when you have more cash.
For sure. And I feel like this is a relevant conversation for those business owners that do by project income is the best way to explain it. And often they kind of get stuck in this mindset that they can only do it one way and they need to be really looking around how they can start creating some kind of model or offer strategy that helps them generate, even if it's just a portion of their income on a consistent basis. So like for us, we're such a good example of this with Thorn Advisors is seasonality is real. Taxes only happen one time a year. Well, 2 times, depending on if you're a business owner and an individual, right? But it happens one time a year. And so that's when we make majority of our money. So in order for us to generate more revenue throughout the year, we started offering strategy for clients. And then we started talking about, hey, what if clients needed bookkeeping that goes along with it? Bookkeeping is not one of those things that we often offer. It's something where it's a need basis, but it does help us with some of that slower month income issues that will arise if we don't have it. So like Andrea, you've been in this business of taxes a little bit longer than myself. What have you seen to be like the biggest struggle with having such a seasonal business?
I think it's when you're in that busy time, you feel like you're making a lot of money and it seems like you're able to take a big distribution or kind of coast for a while because you had a lot of cash coming in. But you really have to plan ahead for the rest of the year and figure out what's your end goal or like your long-term goal with the business, and what should you be investing that cash in? And what do you need to be setting aside to carry you until that next busy time? So it's really important. I know we say this all the time, but it's so important to have your bookkeeping done,
100%.
because this gives you the game plan for how you get to that next busy season. You can run your last year's slow season. You can say, okay, well, my busy season increased this year by 25%. So I'm going to apply the same numbers as last slow season. I'm going to increase it by 25%, and that will give me a good estimate. And then you can use those numbers to figure out, what do you want to do with the cash, if you should be saving it, if you should be spending it, if you can spend it, if you can't. It tells you everything.
And for those of you who got lost when she started talking about 25% more and all of that jazz, like this is the stuff we do in cash flow. This is where you can tap in an expert that can come in and say, hey, this is what you did during your busy season. This is kind of the gap you need to make up on a consistent basis. And this is how much we're recommending you save. So you don't have to do those things alone. I just want to put that out there because it can be very overwhelming if you don't know numbers and you're not as comfortable with them trying to do that on your own. But some other very practical things you can do when we're talking about trying to smooth out having this seasonal flux in income is having a budget. And budgeting based on your lowest expected monthly income is huge. So that kind of then leans itself into having monthly recurring revenue, trying to find something where you can have either payment plans or a monthly offering so that you can build that base and then you budget your expenses accordingly. The worst thing you can do is if January is your slow month, that's when you prepay for something. And I think often we don't think of it that way because we're going to make that up later. But then it's almost like creating a cash scarcity sometimes that we don't even know we're doing. So to Andrea's point, having the books done is huge. Having a budget that expects the lowest monthly income is huge because that gives you a little space to make decisions throughout the year you wouldn't be able to do if you're expecting to make money you have not made. But the next thing I would say is definitely saving extra during those high income months, which you should be able to if you budget. So as somebody who has worked in a business that is seasonal, that has had those ups and downs, what are some pitfalls that people might fall into when they have those high months? You mentioned this before where it's like you take a big cash draw, you might prepay something. What other things do you feel like get in the way of actually saving in those high income months?
I think people get distracted. So they get a bunch of cash that come in and then they feel like they have a creative idea and they're like, ooh, I can try to do this new side venture or I can add this service. But I think it's so important to stay focused on the mission. You have that cash. Don't get distracted. Don't go chase the shiny new object. Like, think about really what your long-term goal is and put everything into that.
For sure. I think it's very easy when you have flexibility to utilize said flexibility, right? But then when you have a slower month, it can feel like you're drowning otherwise. So I think one good rule of thumb is having several months, whether it be 2 to 3 months of expenses in your reserve. Just having that in your back pocket so you're never worrying about if you're going to make payroll. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how much I've seen this with business owners. I've been doing cash flow for long enough to see that most people will start self-funding payroll very quickly because they did not do the legwork on the front end to make sure they had enough cash aside. So I would definitely encourage you to know what that number is And if payroll's a big part of it, which a lot of businesses that have employees, that is their biggest part. If that is your biggest part, making sure you have that and operating expenses set aside for at least 2 to 3 months minimum, and have that money growing in a high yield of sorts, savings account, that is.
Right.
What is another example of something business owners should keep in mind when it comes to really knowing what numbers they have, as well as things to consider as they go into some of these like slower seasons?
Separate your personal and business finances. Don't intermingle everything, because it will make everything murky and confusing. You won't know what's what. You won't really know if the business is losing money if you're putting your own money in there, or maybe your business feels like it's losing money, but you're spending all of it on personal things. So really, to have a clear picture and the most accurate bookkeeping is to keep everything separate.
Absolutely. I also feel like you won't have a good picture if you mix it, right? So even if your books are up to date, but majority of this money is going into owner's draws, it is just not helpful, because your net income will look a certain way, but your cash will look a different way, and it will be less, and you won't even really know that unless you know what you're looking for. And I think that's where things get convoluted for sure. And this is why we always emphasize cash flow management being such a priority, because you can rely on your profit and loss so much. It tells part of the story, but your balance sheet also tells part of the story, and so does the expertise in the expert's head, right? At the end of the day. And so expecting you to know something that you don't do for yourself on a regular basis is unrealistic in this. And that's when you start saying, okay, I actually probably need help trying to manage my cash flow. I probably need help to think through tax strategy, or how to delegate some kind of support when it comes to inconsistent income, because that can be a hard thing to figure out on your own, especially because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
The other biggest thing that I recommend to people where they can create margin right away is regular expense audits. And this, I will be talking about this as one of the cash leaks in an episode, but it is the one thing people push back on me, but it is literally how you gain margin in minutes, is canceling something that has been recurring over and over and over again, and you're not using it. And being really honest with yourself if what you're investing in is actually making a return or not, it just can make all the difference too.
Yeah. And it's having those uncomfortable conversations with yourself.
For sure. For sure.
Whether it's, getting rid of a contractor that isn't adding value, and that's a hard decision and it's not easy to make. But if it's not adding value to your business and it's draining your margin, then it's something you need to do.
For sure. And I think that's it, is like being a business owner is uncomfortable, because majority of people get into business not because they're good at running a business. Yeah.
Right.
But the reality is you have to make these types of decisions in order for you to excel and exceed. And so the biggest thing we want you to take away from this conversation is, though your income may not be predictable, your systems need to be. So you need to set yourself up so that you are, looking at your offer strategy to make sure you have some kind of monthly recurring revenue that you can rely on to be able to build this budget. You need to be able to build a budget, right? Like that is a huge part of actually being able to find some consistency in how you're operating. You need to be saving in those high income months. You need to be making sure you're looking at your cash flow. And if you don't understand your cash flow, hiring somebody to help you figure that out is huge. And as always, you need to be doing your bookkeeping. So then you can go through everything and make sure you have no personal expenses in there. You can make sure your expenses are generating a return. All these things help you create some predictability in what your margin is going to be at the end of the year. So we really want to encourage you today. If you need help with this, we're always here to help. If you want to hop on a call with us, go ahead and head to the show notes and book one.